Hey yo, what's up everybody? The next installment of the main story of Wuthering Waves is soon approaching, and it looks like the next one is going to be a really big update as far as the story goes. So you know I had to hit you guys with the recap. Now, a lot of times when I make recap videos, I like to reread the story over on the wiki. Shout out to all the folks who contribute to the wiki. It's a valuable resource, but sadly, they didn't have the dialogue this time. Just know, when the wuwa community needed me the most, I took up the mantle to save the day. Hey, so if y'all appreciate these recaps, please don't forget to like and share. Anyways, without further ado, let's get it. So Act 9 starts off with us receiving a letter from Augusta. She apologizes for missing our appointed meeting that she scheduled with us before, and she invites us to meet her at the Emperor's Palace. So we head to the palace to formally meet her face to face, one-on-one. And then what ensues is one of the most badass introductions you've ever seen. A shadow cascades over her face, with purple eyes glowing in the shadows. She tosses her huge claymore and squares up with us. It's here, from Augusta, that we learn about the hunt. She explains that the hunt is considered both an honor and a duty among Septimontians, and it's been going on for the past 100 years. It's how Septimont resists the dark tide. They send their best warriors to Sanguis Plateau to fight and hunt the creatures spawned by the dark tide. And she explains that the giant blight cloud above the region has been there since the first dark tide. Augusta wanted to meet us for a few reasons that aren't all revealed here in this conversation. But the first reason is basically that she and the warriors of Septimont recognized how powerful we actually are, and they want to fight alongside someone like us. And the other reason, which is revealed later on in the story, is because of our unwritten fate. Essentially, our fate, or destiny if you will, cannot be read as easily as other people. When our fate is attempted to be read, it just shows up as a blank slate. And as strange as it is, our blank slate of destiny fits right in with the missing pieces of Septimont's prophecies at Tetragon Temple. And we'll get into that in a little bit later. So what happens next is we agree to join, but we state that we have our own goal to accomplish. We tell Augusta about the Sentinel's relic, and we tell her about the Journeying Paradise. She says she's already heard about the Journeying Paradise before. As for the Sentinel's relic, Augusta says that we need to head to a place called Earthren's Wedge. It's the place where the Sentinel first descended upon Sanguis Plateau, and it's the epicenter of the hunt to this very day. But due to its significance, not even Septimont's highest officials have been allowed near it. However, if we need to go there, Augusta says she can make it happen. After this, Augusta tells us where to meet her when it's time to head out to the hunt. So a few days later, we see that giant blight cloud in its full glory. And by this time, it is huge. So this is our signal to get ready. We set out for Tempest Cliffs, the place we're supposed to meet. While on our way there, we run into a man named Avidius. He can tell that we must be on our way to prepare for the hunt and gives us directions. He tells us that he's also a gladiator preparing for the hunt. So who really is Avidius, and where does he come from? Well, later on in the story, it's revealed that Avidius is a noble who seeks the Emperor's seat, and he's participating in the hunt not only as a tradition to save Septimont, but also in a way to prove himself to the Senate, to be worthy enough for the position. He wants to save the day and become the leader of the land. Now, that doesn't sound too bad. From all this, he sounds like a pretty ambitious young man. But that is until we find out that he isn't even real. And when I say we, I mean we as the player, because Rover has still yet to discover that Avidius is a creation of Cristofaro. And in fact, Grover doesn't know much about Cristofaro or his deeds up until this point. It's been all us, the player, who's been seeing and experiencing these things. And of course, we all know how deceptive and manipulative Cristofaro can be at best. And he's downright villainous at worst, which is kind of sad because Avidius is a very ambitious guy, but for all general intents and purposes throughout the story, he seems like a pretty solid dude, but we'll come back to him in a bit. So After we arrive at Tempest Cliffs, we catch up with F or Augusta, and it's time to head out to the Crimson Sanguis Plateaus. We're a little taken aback because the bridge is broken, but Augusta is all like, the path of glory will reveal itself under the feet of the brave. And then she just jumps off the cliff.
I will not fall here.
I'm playing, y'all. We end up flying out on griffins. So when we get there, we're immediately attacked by a Chorosaurus, another abomination of the Dark Tide. And they've nicknamed this particular Chorosaurus Tyrannos. After beating it down a bit, Yuno comes out and she shoots it with an arrow, causing Tyrannos to retreat. And just as we attempt to pursue it, Augusta tells us, nah, don't, it's all good, because it's heading directly into the trap that they have already set for it. After this, we regroup with Augusta, Yuno, and Avidius at the Gladiator base camp. Yuno formally introduces herself to us, and she tells us to come kick it with her at Tetragon Temple whenever we get a moment. Augusta tells us about that Chorosaurus. She says that they call it Tyrannos, and that it is a vanguard of the Dark Tide. After this, Augusta gives us some key information. She says that while the Thernoidian was unsuccessful in taking over Septimont, it never really stopped trying. Of course, we all know that Leviathan Thernoidian created the Dark Tide, and it carries out its will. But here, Augusta tells us that the Earthwind Wedge holds Sentinel Imperator's power, and only that can sever the link between the Dark Tide and the Thernoidian, burying the calamity beneath Sanguis Plateau. However, the Earthwind Wedge's area of effect is limited. So to truly kill the creatures of the Dark Tide, in a way that won't just result in them being reabsorbed into the Dark Tide, we have to hunt and kill the beast near the Earthrender. And Augusta says that this must be done within range of Maroonwood, and that's also where we'll wait for the beast to enter. Augusta tells us not to be deceived by appearances though, because Tyrannos may appear to be some kind of savage beast, but just as much as they're hunting it is hunting them. This creature is a creation of the Dark Tide, more specifically, a vanguard of the Dark Tide, so we should stay vigilant. After this, the Senate summons Augusta to meet and discuss the plans for the hunt. This leaves us with some free time, so we decide to head out to Tetragon Temple and catch up with Yuno. You know what I mean? See what she's talking about. When we get there, we can't really find Yuno immediately, so we decide to be nosy and take a look around. That's when we stumble across some strange murals. Turns out these murals convey prophetic scenes of Septimont's past and future. Some of them are pretty straightforward, and we can understand them, but there's one peculiar mural that we just can't seem to wrap our heads around. And as we're staring at this mural, a video slides up, and it's here that we learn the true meaning of this painting, as well as a few others. Essentially, the large mural we're enamored with depicts Septimont's future. The hero of hero rises up against the Dark Tide, and in the middle of it all is an unknowable void. And strangely enough, unknowable void are the same words used by Yuno and Grandma Lilibet to describe our fate. Finally, Yuno joins us and Avidius in the main hall, and she immediately lays into Avidius.
What is it this time? Staring at an empty wall, hoping one day it will bear your name?
She calls into question his motives, his deeds, and his political affiliation with the Senate. And here it gets explained that Avidius received a Medal of Honor for his expeditions into Maine's Deep, which is a dangerous area that had been repeatedly attacked by the Dark Tide 4 years ago. And it's this, among other things, that makes people feel he is a potential contender for the FRC. Yuno accuses Avidius of wanting to defeat Tyrannos first, so he can prove himself to be the leader of Septimont. And Avidius claps back. He says that if he's the hero of heroes, Septimont will be spared from his prophesied destruction, and that as Septimont's culture has it, it's the strong that should lead. He says Augusta lacks the extraordinary power mentioned in the prophecy. He says that Augusta's resonance ability is weak, and that he's a stronger resonator. And Avidius isn't really casting as much shade as you think, because throughout the story, by others and Augusta herself, it's established that Augusta's resonance abilities are in fact weak. She basically got to where she is with a combination of brute force, strategy, and sheer willpower. Avidius ends his speech saying, "Sneak attacks aren't really his style, and that if Augusta wants to challenge him, he's ready to shoot her a fair one, giving her the respect she deserves." And then he chucks the deuces and he pieces out. Afterwards, Yuno basically breaks it down for us. She says that because of how Augusta shook up the Senate when she became Ephor, tearing down corruption and all, they don't really rock with her too tough like that. At the same time, Augusta isn't really worried about challengers like Avidius. She told Yuno that the Ephor seat only really matters when a strong gladiator wants it. So basically, bring all the smoke. She keep a bone crusher in the tuck. She ain't never scared. Yuno says that Augusta has defeated resonators with strong fortes like Avidius before, so she's not even worried about that part. But there is one thing that does worry her, and that is something about him feels unnatural. Of course, as I explained before, my guy was created by Cristofaro, so that's to be expected. Suddenly, a griffin swoops by, and that's the signal for Yuno to leave and perform her duties for the hunt. Meanwhile, we hear the horn echo, meaning it's time for us to regroup with Augusta. We get glimpses of her throughout the story. Even at this point, it appears that something is whispering to her. When we meet her, she gives us an anchor stone. She says that these stones are made from tacitite formed around the earth render, and they can repel dark tide energy to a degree. So the plan is to place these in 3 special obelisks around the area to create a force field, driving the Chorosaurus to where we need him to go. But remember what Augusta said earlier about Tyrannos? Well, all of that comes into play right here. At first, it looks like we're tracking it, but soon enough, we find our tables turned. However, we managed to light all 3 obelisks, leading Tyrannos right where we wanted him, in Affidel Barrens. And then, out of the blue, Augusta just calls out Avidius for a showdown. She's basically like, "I heard you want the crown. Well, come take it." So they have a good old-fashioned beat-off, or the two of them fight together against Tyrannos to see who can beat it first.
Let your ambitions burn even hotter.
And then they go to work. But during this bout, as expected, Augusta comes out on top. We cornered the beast only for the dark tide to swallow it. But turns out that was a part of the plan in the first place. They wanted to lure out the false sovereign because they wanted to defeat it before it gains more power. Yuno acts quickly and she shoots an arrow into the dark tide so she can anchor the false sovereign in its physical form. And instantly, she, as well as we, the rover, get that tragic vision of Septimon's fall and Augusta's defeat. Yuno begins a descent into fate. Essentially, she almost gets lost in the chaos of fate, but after we call her name, she manages to grab a hold of fate and she comes back into the real world. Augusta, with Rover's help, was able to defeat the first sovereign, but it transforms back into the dark tide and it slithers away. After all this occurs, it becomes apparent that the effects that we see around Augusta from time to time until this point were indicating that the Denodian has been whispering to her. This time, instead of just a couple words or so, it's the first time we, the player, hear this whisper speaking to her at length. Of course, this is still outside of the rover's knowledge at the moment. Leviathan Denodian wants Augusta to be jealous of us and our power. It wants to tempt her into being consumed by the dark tide so that she can become an agent of the dark tide. While this is our first time hearing the Denodian whisper to her like this at length, it isn't its first time doing so. In fact, she's been receiving the Denodian's whisper ever since she was a little kid. Bruh, thank the Sentinels, she's not a Ragunazi. Otherwise, Augusta would have been snatched up a long time ago. So anyways, the whisper tells her to go back to her home, Murmur's Town. Augusta is brought back from her trance by Yuno, who asks Augusta if she'll still fight if Septimon is destroyed. And Augusta drops a bar. She says, "A ruler assumes their place by accomplishing the impossible for their subjects." Augusta goes off to carry out her mission and recover gladiators that might be left behind. Meanwhile, we're tasked with looking after Yuno. Yuno tells us that her prophecies are never wrong. But one important thing of note is that these prophecies are coming from the dark tides, so it's obviously going to show them what it wants them to see. Anyways, here we learn a few very important things about Yuno. First, she made a deal with fate. She traded her ability to see the future for the ability to resist the dark tide. So she can't really see the future anymore. The second thing is that her resonance ability comes at a cost. Her power can make the creatures of the dark tide manifest in a physical form rather than an amorphous liquid, and she can lock them in this form. But this comes at a price. Each time she does this, she loses a piece of her existence. And as she's telling us all of this, we look down at her hands and they're glowing translucent. And all of this is foreshadowing what will happen at the end of the quest. Yuno tells us that she should be fine with a little bit of rest, so we leave her be. But before we go, she gives us one of her Lunarum bracelets. It contains a small portion of her resonance power. After this, we briefly catch up with Davidius, and we finally ask him about Main's Deep, and he openly explains in detail about his experience. Now, this might seem like a bit of a side tangent, but I promise all of this is coming full circle. So what happened? Well, 4 years ago, during a high tide, he had no intention of mimicking the deeds of 3 legendary hero of heroes, but the dark tide had him and his men blocked, and he had no other choice but to go further and further into Main's Deep. By the end of it, most of his men had fallen. Only a few survived, and of those who did, they were corrupted by the dark tide. He had to use Mesona, a special medicinal plant that grows only in Main's Deep, to heal them. But these ailments would continue to torment them long after this experience, causing them to cut their time as gladiators. From those on this expedition, only he remains able to join the hunt. After the crisis, the former Effer granted him his home leaf medal. So, after this, we end up catching back up with Augusta to find out that they've established a connection with Black Shores and they've been working with a consultant. Turns out the consultant is Bu Ling. Rover. Bruh. You gotta be more knowledgeable about your own squad. So anyway, the Black Shores has been granted access to Septimon's Genesis Nexus, and it's able to monitor the dark tide and provide assistance should it be necessary. Bu Ling tells us that the dark tide here is gobbling up frequencies like crazy, and these frequencies are all going into strengthening the false sovereign. She says that it's likely planning to gain enough power to destroy the Earth-Wind's wedge, and if this happens, all the dark tide energy under the hunting grounds will explode forward, decimating all of Renacita. So the plan is to stop it before this happens. To enact our plan, we head to Murmur's Town. This place is the place where Avidius braved the Main's Deep, a place where Augusta once called home, where the dark tide first started 16 years ago, a place that used to be called Fabianum. And now this place is just a shell of its former self. Buildings are calloused over, turned to ash and stone. The bodies of the fallen raised by the dark tide, forever its puppets. While in Murmur's Town, we discover a Sonarosphere, and it transports us to a snapshot of the past. And we're able to see Fabianum, Augusta, and her childhood friend, Angel. Through this Sonaro, we learn a lot about Augusta's motives and a number of things that just might come into play in Acts 10 and 11. We find out that Augusta has another motive: to be at odds with the Senate, not just because of a general sense of justice against corruption. For her, it's personal. When Fabianum was attacked by the dark tide, the people there fought hard as they could and held out for as long as possible, but aid from Septimont City never came. She heard from senior gladiators that on that day, the very morning that Fabianum fell, most of the Senate lords were still sound asleep in their warm beds. In Fabianum, there were always stories of legends and myths of heroic deeds, but the most popular one was the tale of the great journey to Main's Deep, the ruins of an ancient civilization. Any of this sounded familiar yet? It was said that in order to enter Main's Deep, you needed to bring 2 lives, yourself and your sword. There, in Main's Deep, you would be able to hear the unceasing whispers of legendary heroes. The entrance to Main's Deep was said to be Oak Hollow, a shallow opening in a nearby tree. Augusta and Angel desperately wanted to become strong warriors to enter Main's Deep. but they just couldn't seem to get their hands on a sword, or keep a sword once they got it. Eventually, the dark tide struck and it began to consume their village. Augusta and Angel ran and ran. Eventually, they arrived at Oak Hollow, cornered by the dark tide. Soon, Augusta would find that the whisper she heard was not the same as promised. All she heard were words of cruelty and ridicule. The whisper told her that the dark tide only answers to strength. Those without it are doomed to be forsaken. The dark tide whizzes past her to consume Angel, but for some reason, it continued to whisper to her about her lack of strength and that she needs to give into the dark tide to attain the power of godhood that she deserves. When we ask what happened to Angel, Augusta says what happened in Oak Hollow remains a mystery. When she found her, her resonance ability grew immensely, so much so that the dark tide couldn't even withstand it. However, Angel couldn't control these abilities, and soon she was transformed into something no longer human. After that, Augusta never saw her again. Augusta stands before Oak Hollow, recounting the things that led her to this point in life. While clearly once a child of strong character, she had no desire for great power, but she saw no other way forward than to attain it. She knows that the Senate and aristocrats on Capitoline Hill slander her name and are plotting on her downfall. She says that people cling to hope for a hero of heroes. If the lack of power in her resonance ability raises doubts about her ability to rule, let the hero of heroes step forth and challenge her. If none appear, she will decide if the title is worthy. She says that the legend speaks of a hero of heroes with extraordinary power, and she sees no one else who fits that description as well as us. So if that's the case, she would gladly accept our challenge. We enter Oak Hollow with Augusta and see phantoms of young Augusta and Angel. After they dissipate, a mysterious frequency is left behind. We send this data back to Buling and see if she can help us find the false sovereign. It helps a bit, but we use Yuno's bracelet to pinpoint its location. The false sovereign emerges, and Rover and Augusta starts beating the brakes off of it. Avidius even joins in, but he gets clapped up real quick. Then the false sovereign retreats to soak up more frequencies and become even stronger. We all begin to strategize on the best course of action and what to do next. We decide that we'll attack the false sovereign from the inside, making it swallow one of the anchor stones. Yuno says that she'll use her abilities to anchor the false sovereign in place, just like last time. Although Augusta warns her about this because she says that she just recovered from doing this before, and we're expecting the false sovereign to be way more powerful after soaking up all those frequencies. I have to go back a little bit because some of these events happen roughly at the same time. So Avidius was talking to one member of the Senate, and they straight up tried to hoe him, but Avidius had to remind this guy of who he really is. He's the one who braved the Mains Deep 4 times, protecting his men from the high tide, treating them with medicinal plants, and escaping by the skin of his teeth. He's the one whose forte is stronger than the current F4. And he was basically like, bruh, don't play with my name. There's a reason why I am where I am. So after this exchange, the Senate member passes out due to dark tide exposure and then being smacked by Avidius. This sparked something within Avidius. He just had to go back to Oak Hollow, but when he gets there, he doesn't see the entrance to Mains Deep, and my guy is devastated. Fast forward to back where we were, Avidius is on the ground and he's freaking out. His whole identity is shaken. He says Mains Deep doesn't exist, and he asks if it was because of him. His memories seem to be shattering. Remember, he's a creation of Cristofaro, so these memories are all false, but he's not taking it well at all. After this, Augusta smashes an anchor stone, and she carries a piece of it with her as planned. After we exit Murmurstown, she gives a signal to Yuno, and Yuno fires an arrow to lock down the false sovereign. We enter Earthrend's Wedge, and Augusta finally tells us that she's been hearing the Thenodians whisper ever since that day as a child in Oak Hollow. She says that the whispers helped her in every battle, telling her when to dodge and when to strike. But after each battle won, those whispers grew quieter and quieter, and that was until she became F4. Now the whispers are ceaseless, And whenever she strayed from their guidance, fate would strike her down in the cruelest of ways. The Whisperer's prophecies always came true, and it always knew the best course of action. She says that now it's time to put the Whisperer's powers to the test. What Augusta is doing is she's trying to fulfill the prophecy of the hero of heroes, but in a kind of roundabout loophole. Instead of her being the hero, she knows that we're stronger. She wants to sacrifice herself and allow us to become the hero of heroes to fulfill the prophecy. And the Tenodian is loving all of this. It's like, yes, she's finally chosen me. Don't resist. Step forward and receive your divine gift. It says, with this power you shall rise as the one true ruler of Septimon. As expected, the Whisperer's promises of power and prophecy were just a trap. Augusta was its target all along. Augusta gets heated, and she speaks to the Whisperer saying, who are you? And what did you do to Angel? And the Tenodian is just like, you're a mortal, just a regular Joe. You don't get answers from the divine. The dark tide consumes her, presumably to devour her and use her for its bidding. But Augusta bursts out through the first sovereign, and she uses the spirits of all the people whose swords she's collected to perform a spirit bomb slash, destroying the false sovereign. Then they both, Rover and Augusta, agree to share the title of Hero of Heroes. We gaze upon Earthwind's wedge and receive a discoid. We can sense Imperator's essence emanating from it, but we aren't able to open it. However, we suppose that Cardathea might be the perfect person to help us uncover the mystery of this device. We tell Augusta that if anyone can solve this issue of the dark tide in Septimon, it's her. Of course, Cardi can't really travel right now because of her condition. Nonetheless, Augusta says she can't wait to have the opportunity to meet her. Rover and Augusta return to camp, and we're given an omniscient view of Cristofaro walking through Murmurstown. Referring to Avidius, he says, what a beautiful ending, my near-perfect protagonist. He says that even he didn't see this coming. Holding Avidius's home leaf medal, Cristofaro decides that he's not done with Avidius just yet. He wants to see how far he can push his soul. Then Cristofaro unleashes a flock of paper cranes, confirming that he was indeed Nestor, the one who told us about Augusta's past during the Overture quest. The final shot reveals Gelbrenna. She speaks to her mysterious voice, saying that she's here to hunt the Tenodian. Alright, so I won't be going too deep into Act 9 because I feel like most of it didn't really have too much to do with the main story, so I'll just be giving a brief synopsis of what occurs and the parts that I think are most likely to be important going forward. In Act 9, one of the first things that becomes apparent is that Yuno is missing. Not just missing, no one seems to know her. Even though she's a popular person and known throughout the land, it may be possible that not everyone recognizes her, but when we talk to people who definitely should know her, like other priestesses, they don't know her. In fact, they think we're lost in the sauce because of the dark tide, and we're corrupted with dissociation, and that we're hallucinating that she ever even existed. Everyone's memory has somehow filled in the gaps where Yuno was present with some other seemingly plausible event. Even Augusta can't quite wrap her head around things. She kinda remembers Yuno, but not exactly. She chalks it up to it being dissociation, which honestly, given her status, even if she did remember everything, it's probably the smartest thing to do. Imagine trying to lead a whole nation of people where they all think you're crazy. Anyway, so what happened to Yuno? Well, remember when Yuno shot her moonbow to lock down the false sovereign for the first time in Act 8? Her arm started to become translucent then. You see, Yuno was born under a lunar eclipse, so she has a special connection to divinations and to fate. Just as she told us earlier, she gave up her ability to see the future because it all started to be too much, to see all the bad things in life but not be able to really change them. So she made a deal with fate, and her deal with fate was that she can no longer see the future in exchange for the ability to resist the dark tide. But resisting the dark tide by locking it down comes at a cost of a small piece of her existence. So Just as Augusta warned at the end of Act 8, the false sovereign had become much stronger by the end of the act, and it basically took all of Yuno's existence to lock it down. Essentially, she died by fate. So, as we find ourselves being the only ones that really remembers Yuno, it's up to us to unravel the mystery and restore Yuno's existence. We remember that we still have her bracelet, the one with a portion of her resonance power. After taking out Yuno's bracelet, its frequency leads us to a place where we can meet Yuno, and she basically explains to Rover what I said earlier, but Rover just can't accept this ending. We deduce that everything that's ever existed leaves a trace. So we had to find a trace of Yuno. We head to Tetragon Temple to look for traces of her existence. When we get there, Lilibet and the other priestesses mysteriously aren't around. Nonetheless, Yuno's glowing bracelet leads us to a wall, and this wall is actually a secret passageway. And to me, this is one of the most interesting parts of the story, and this portion of the story will almost 100% be connected to future events and other stories. So, throughout these various rooms, we encounter paintings of events that seem to be rewritten, until eventually we start hearing this mysterious voice. We open a gate to what looks like some sort of posh, lavish prison cell. The voice is revealed to be Avidius. He's talking to himself. When he hears someone coming, he's ecstatic. However, when he realizes it's us, he is very disappointed. He says that the person he needs to lure failed to show, and asks if we're here just to mock him. We say, "Nah, that ain't me, G." He responds that we sound so innocent, like we aren't the reason he's down here. He says that it's us that brought him to Tetragon Temple to try to erase him from the story. Also, we can summon the one behind it all. We can hear the erratic trembling in his voice as he says,
"I played along. I agreed to be watched here because I wanted to see him, wanted to look him in the eye. But now it's clear we'll both be disappointed. I am fate's discarded pawn, and he couldn't care less what happens to me."
Sidebar, but can we get a round of applause for the voice actor here? Yo, they had me deeply invested in a whole NPC side character. So anyway, we are clueless as to what Avidius is talking about. And we're like, what? Are you saying this is our plan? And Avidius is like, no one else is here. There's no reason to put on an act. So we start playing along, and Avidius starts going off. It becomes more and more apparent that his memories and everyone else's memories in reference to him are all made up. When he went to Oak Hollow, the entrance to Main's Deep, a door he's gone through countless times, no longer existed. He realizes that everyone seems to know his deeds, but none can explain how. He can't even find a single soul that actually witnessed his so-called exploits. He tore through his memories to find a hand holding a feathered quill. It wrote everything about him since the day he was born. It was at this point Avidius realized existence itself is anchored in connection, feeling, and memory. They are its very manifestation. So if someone used their resonance ability to fabricate a memory of a hero of heroes and convinces everyone it's real, does that fabricated person really exist? And right in the middle of this interesting philosophical conversation, Grandma Lilibet puts an end to it. She's like, enough. She says that she didn't allow him to stay here and defile fate with his delusions. Obviously, she too might not be privy that these are all valid questions, especially for someone created by another person's abilities, a person who's started to realize that they're a fabrication even when no one else does. Avidius is in a state where he can't just go back to playing along like everything in his past is real. Sidebar, this guy, he needs to be a playable character. Like, his story is richer than some of the actual characters. Anyway, Lilibet invites us back to the hall to talk. Augusta told her about what we said, so Lilibet did some digging. Just like everyone else, she can't remember Yuno, but she found evidence of her existence. However, according to that evidence, she died 3 years ago. Rover is taken aback, but Lilibet says that there's a difference between death and disappearance. She deduces that the current situation must be some sort of fabrication. We're confused by all of this, but Lilibet basically says that when someone dies, they die. There is no reason to replace memories or generate fabrications. So something is off. She reluctantly admits that Avidius' logic was correct, even though he was mainly just talking about his situation. However, since we remember Yuno, we've anchored her connection into reality. So Yuno is caught in the chaos between existence and non-existence. So together with Grandma Lilibet, we head to a place where Yuno was said to have died 3 years ago. We set out to enter the chaos of fate and bring Yuno back to reality. After diving into the chaos, we find Yuno. During the process, we see numerous snapshots of her past. We learn about her being from a family held to high esteem, her mother a celebrated gladiator, her father a famed blacksmith. We continue traveling through the chaos, guided by her father to anchor her memories to the past. And we see where she gained the inspiration to defy fate, which is actually from Augusta. Yuno began to feel like, what's the point of divination if you receive hopeless prophecies? Then we relive that moment from 3 years ago, where she defied fate. She prophesied the death of a squad of gladiators in a battle against the Dark Tide. But instead of standing by, she joined the battle and saved Aurelius and other Septimontians who were destined to die. We pull Yuno out of the chaos into the unknowable void. Her fate has now been rewritten, and her fate now too becomes an unknowable void of possibility. In the end, still no one remembers Yuno, but she's alive, out of the chaos, and in the real world. However, she's confident that eventually, once again, her, Augusta, and the rest of her friends will be thick as thieves. And that, folks, is the story of Wuthering Waves, Acts 8 and 9. I know Kuro has a lot in store for us in the coming acts, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts in the comments. I know Act 9 was a bit different as far as main quests go, but anyways, feel free to let me know where you guys are expecting the story to go. Also, don't forget to like and share. That is all I have for you guys today, and until next time, I'll catch you in the waves. Peace.